This is the Dawg Days podcast from UGAsports.com. It's the podcast where we chat with former Georgia Bulldogs about their eras in Athens. I'm your host, Dayne Young, a contributor to UGAsports.com. If you want to hear from Terrence Edwards, Chris Burnett, Arthur Lynch, Keith Marshall, Aaron Davis, they're all back in your feed. You can scroll back for those. This episode features Jon Richt, son of former head coach Mark Richt. Jon literally grew up around the program and then was a recruited quarterback himself. You'll hear his journey through all of that, growing up around Georgia, going to Clemson, transferring to Mars Hill College, and then becoming a coach at Miami with Mark Richt when he left there. Jon's back in Georgia now doing some coaching, and here he is, Jon Richt. Jon Richt joining us here on the Dawg Days podcast. Jon, really appreciate you joining us, and you've got such an incredible story and really a lot longer than some of the people that we have chatted with on here because you literally grew up around the program. But for people, the UGA fans out there that may not know, they knew that you were probably at Miami, but what have you been up to? You were telling me you're back in Georgia now.
Yeah, so we just moved back up to Georgia. Me and my family, my wife Anna and two girls, Jaden and Zoe, and we're excited to be back home. We got a lot of family up here, doing some good things, just working with some quarterbacks in the area. So still getting to have some fun.
Yeah, so it's a new venture. It's called Quarterback Catalyst. And what made you want to start it?
Yeah, so I guess the past couple of years, just being in the NFL for a year with the Buffalo Bills and then being down in Miami, there's a few different things that I've picked up on, from a lot of great coaches. And the big thing is, I don't know if y'all know, but my daughter, Jaden, my 5-year-old, actually has Crohn's disease. And that disease kind of gets affected when you move around a lot. And so as a football coach, if you stay in the profession, whether you're getting fired or you're doing good, you're probably going to move a little bit. And so that was one of the main reasons is why we decided to settle down, doing the quarterback catalyst, and then also looking to open two training facilities in the Athens and Lawrenceville area.
I did not know that about your daughter. So, your family circumstances keep you from doing the traditional job hopping that a lot of others do. So I'm excited to talk about your academy, but if you don't mind, I'd like to start kind of in your childhood because you literally grew up around the game. So I'm assuming your earliest memories, are they Tallahassee?
Yeah, running around in Doak Campbell Stadium back when I think they might have changed the name by now, but it was literally, I used to run through the stands, running through the crowd with my football, thinking that I'm at that time Wart Dunn or, Travis Minor and that kind of, those players back at Florida State, acting like I'm juking people out in the, down underneath the stadium, and basically learned that thing like the back of my hand. So yeah, Florida State was the beginning, of all the memories of being out there at practice every day and just kind of enjoying what my dad got to do every day.
And they were on top of the college football world at that time. I mean, right, when you're getting to where you're remembering and can be around the program a lot. What are your memories of being around practice and the excitement of how good they were?
I mean, that's kind of just what it was for me. I mean, I really was young. I was, 10 and under at Florida State. So it really spoiled me. It made me not used to losing, not even just football, but just different things. There's almost a mindset that you learned by being around that program that losing wasn't an acceptable outcome, and you were going to be on top, and that's how you played, that's how you worked, that's how you did everything. And and then just to be around some of the unreal talent that they had. I didn't even realize it, but, just mimicking guys like Charlie Ward and Chris Winkie and, the Brad Johnsons, the Casey Weldons, all those guys. Those were some really top-notch football players, but they were just my buddies that I thought, my dad got to go work with and have fun with. So it was an awesome childhood being able to grow up around that. And then, of course, Bobby Bowden was one of the best mentors to my father, and especially in the fact that he allowed us as kids to come around and be a part of my dad's workplace, which was unreal.
Do you have any funny stories from Bobby? I mean, he's one of the more, he's a huge personality in college football and the history of what the sport is, especially, you're seeing all the things now about college football 150. Bobby Bowden's right in the center of that. Do you have any funny
Yeah.
stories from him from your childhood?
Well, I still, just like my dad says, I still don't think he knows my name. He calls everybody buddy. Hey buddy, come on over here, buddy. Come on into my office. We just walk right in there. Me and my little brother David, we just run into Bobby Bowden's office, go say hello, and run out. Didn't think twice about it. But here we are hanging out with the legend, and we had no clue. No clue.
So, I mean, you're around 10 years old when the Georgia stuff comes up. Do you remember any of that? I mean, was there a big family meeting and your dad's having to say, hey, we've got this opportunity here, or was it just we're going?
Yeah, so that's actually a funny story a little bit because I guess, I had grown up in one place and I didn't know how spoiled I was as a coach's kid to be in one place for 10 years. Dad being there for 15. And, he kind of brought us in, set us down, and he's like, guys, I just took the job at Georgia. We're going to be moving to Georgia. And, he's kind of expecting us to be all excited and all that kind of stuff. Like, hey, Dad's going to be a head coach. Of course, I go in my room, I throw a fit. I'm all mad and all this kind of stuff. And then, Dad had given us these little hats. And I guess I had thrown such a fit that, Dad was feeling so bad for me. He was like about to come in there and be like, you know what, we'll figure it out. We'll do it. Well, I come running back in there with my hat on, like, Dad, let's go, let's do this. And like, we got excited and, everybody kind of jumped around and got excited and had a really cool moment of just, the family being all in and kind of running around and, enjoying the moment.
Did you know anything about Georgia at that time other than, there was a college football team there?
I knew nothing. I knew nothing about Georgia at that time. I learned their Bulldog mascot really fast, and then we actually got to watch them play Hawaii in the bowl game, I believe, that year. And Terrence Edwards was a receiver. I do remember that because he made some really good plays in that game. But it was, or maybe they played in the Hawaii Bowl. Somebody, I don't know. I can't remember. I was 10. But it was kind of my first memories of Georgia, getting to know them and getting to kind of figure out their, where we were going to be was interesting as a 10-year-old, but it was good.
So then your family moves up here, you're getting acclimated. Obviously the life of being in a college football coach's family, it's just unique. Family time is not the same. There's always different demands that call. What do you remember about getting used to Athens and being in a new place for the first time in your life?
Well, it was interesting, because the first time you change schools, first time you do anything, but then when all of a sudden your last name is the first thing that people realize, and then everybody starts being your friend real fast, and ended up working out as a young kid. Even the young boys at that age, their dads had said Rick's name enough, he's going to be the new head coach. They had said it enough to where those kids recognized it. And, it was one of those things it made it a little bit easier, I'm sure. But it, at the same time, it was, trying to figure out a new style of life because Tallahassee is a little bit different than Athens and all that kind of stuff. But I will say they did an awesome job at Georgia, just really bringing us in and making us feel like family. We were able to find a great church in Prince Avenue Church, and then, ended up going to school there too. So we were able to build a little community in that as well, which was great.
Were you already playing like Little League football or anything at the time, or did that come a little bit later?
Yeah, I was already playing in Florida. You can't play tackle football until you're like 10, I believe, or that's what the rule was. So I had just played my first year of tackle football and basically peewee football back in Florida. So I think that rule's changed by now, but that's kind of what it was. I was playing flag football for a long time, played my first year of tackle, and then we moved to Georgia, and obviously continue to play tackle football.
I mean, at the rate that recruiting's changing, if it hasn't changed, it might in the next few years.
Right, I know.
All right, so you get into high school and you're playing at Prince Avenue Christian. At this point, you've seen a lot of just great memories at UGA. But you're also pursuing your own football accolades here. What was the balance for you trying to be, a star player on your high school team, but at the same time, your dad's the coach of UGA. So how do you balance that personally of what you're going through?
Yeah, so I mean that wasn't easy, to be honest. A big thing that my dad had always taught me was be your own man. And that's really hard to do when your dad is such a big figure and then you're going into the same realm or same arena that he's in. You automatically get related to that. So I used to hate it with a passion when I would do something good on Friday night or whatever it was. And then the first thing that said in the newspaper was Coach Richt's son did this or did that. And, that was hard, and it was hard to learn. You had to take the compliments where you could get them sometimes. But, it was different. There was always that little chip on my shoulder, and also chips on everybody else's shoulder that played against me, I guarantee, because that fact was brought up multiple times. Tell your dad about me and all that kind of stuff after they'd hit you or something like that. So there was always some fun stuff that went on in between the bantering between games because of it. But ultimately, it provided me with a great, foundation to stand on as far as learning the game, and then also being able to train at a facility like Georgia every now and then with the guys, and just being around the football team and being around those quarterbacks, David Green, DJ Shockley, those guys, really being able to watch them and how they went about their business kind of shaped the way I tried to do some of the things that I did.
By the time that you got to where you were playing high school football, I mean, were you able to be around Georgia practices as much, just because, being a high school football player, that schedule's already packed as it is?
It is. Yeah, no, it was rare. But every now and then they'd have night practices, or the bowl games were always something that I was around, or like to be. Then I started playing basketball, and then those disappeared too. But whenever I could figure it out, usually camp, I was around all the time because we hadn't started yet, or we were about to get going, that type of deal. But I tried to be around about as much as I humanly possibly could, to be honest. And it was great because I did love it, and that's why I was there. But also I was able to spend some time with Dad. So the time restriction on coaching, I guess, helped a little bit, that the fact that I was so ingrained in football as well.
Did you have a favorite player or anything at Georgia when you were, maybe when you moved here closer to 11 years old or even beyond that? Did you have a guy that you connected with either because of their play or just because they were so nice to you?
The first guy that I actually connected with was Tyson Browning and Tim Jennings. Those two guys, I think they might have been in the first recruiting class. And, recruiting, you learn how to recruit as a kid when your dad's the head coach, because you literally, the families are coming to your house, you're going to these events, and you're having to talk to people and consistently having to be around that. You learn how to do that. Well, those two guys hit it off with me, and we basically just became buddies. Every time I was around, I was able to, mess around with those guys and had a good time. And there was countless guys that, just were awesome to meet as a young kid. Just being around the football program and allowing me to, jack around with them and them not beat me up too bad. Just that type of stuff. It was a cool experience for me because of the players. The players were awesome.
When did you know that you wanted to be a quarterback? Was it growing up that was obviously just, if I'm going to play football, that's what I'm going to do? Or was that something you had to kind of figure out that you liked?
Actually, when I was very young, I was probably the best quarterback, just because I hung around with Dad all the time, but I did not want to play quarterback. I wanted to play receiver or something like fun, to where like I got to catch the ball and score touchdowns. Like that was my thought process, right? But as I got older and older, I realized, how much more responsibility, and then also the idea of being able to control every play, every game, appealed to me. And, that was what ultimately won me over, is the fact that, as a quarterback, you touch the ball every play. And I always was ultra, ultra, ultra competitive. And so if I could influence even just one little part of every play, that was a big thing for me.
So going toward the end of your high school tenure, I think the assumption is with your last name that you're going to find your way to be on Georgia's roster somewhere, or at least publicly that's what gets thrown out there. Just like you said, when that's your last name, people think that. You go to Clemson. Right. What's the story there?
Yeah, so basically my sophomore year, or the summer after my sophomore year, going into my junior year, we decided we were going to go around and go do some camps. And we went around and did some camps, and Dad was kind of hoping that it was one of those things to where, like, nothing really happened, and I got mad, and I saw that there's other players that were good and all that kind of stuff. Well, we went to Clemson, and Clemson ended up offering me. He's like, well, that backfired. So basically, through that camp experience and all that kind of stuff, I really loved my time there. I loved Coach Bowden, who was there, Terry Bowden, or Tommy Bowden, I'm sorry, Tommy Bowden. And, just being around that group, Dabbu was there. Coach Rob Spence was there as the quarterback coordinator coach. Really enjoyed my time there. And then, we kind of sat down and talked about it after that, because that's when I started to become a recruited prospect by some other schools. And we kind of just sat down and decided, hey, it's probably best that I do not go to Georgia, to where Dad was like, I'm not even going to offer you because I don't believe it would be a good fit for you, or I don't even want to give you that choice. Because I am a homebody at heart, I probably would take staying home if I could. But ultimately, as a quarterback, even if I am the best player, hands down, I go in there, I struggle for one game, and what's the reason that I'm playing? That everybody would say. They'd say it's because you're the head coach's son. That's why you're doing it. And we would stress that. It would run into our family life. And we just weren't gonna get into that. We wanted to separate the two. And I also, going back to the quote of earlier, wanted to be my own man. I didn't want to have to be Dad's. If I went to Georgia, it would just be, the same thing over and over again. But eventually I had to break away and make my own path.
When it's even different when, in your situation, it's a head coach, but then obviously a head coach that has a vested stake in quarterbacks. That's what he built his reputation on. Even at South Carolina right now, Jake Bentley's dad is a coach on their staff, but he coaches running backs. He doesn't directly coach quarterbacks. And so, I don't think you have some of the same things. And then on top of that, he's not the head coach. So it seems like there was just a lot of circumstances involved that would have really muddied the waters, not only for UGA, but for your family personally.
No doubt.
So tell me about Dabbu Sweeney, because I think a lot of people know him now, but right around the process of when you were there, that's when he was coming on the national scene as Clemson was in the midst of change.
Yeah, so when I got there, Dabbu, he was still young. I mean, he was, I don't know how old, but he was still a young coach at that point. And we get there, we go through the first half of that season, and we really struggle. It was kind of a shock that they let Coach Bowden go. They had just signed him to a 5-year deal, but it was kind of just a whirlwind. And then all of a sudden they brought on Dabbu as the head coach. And, being a true freshman, I didn't know. I mean, I was redshirted. I was on the, basically on the scout team paying my dues, trying to get all that stuff done. And, the Dabbu takes over, and he basically asks us to commit, and he still says the same thing. He wants you to be all in. And his whole thing was, if you're all in with me, and then, you're not only all in with me being your coach, you're all in with you doing everything that you have to do to compete and do it the right way. So you have to hold yourself to a high standard and be all in on yourself as well. And, just certain things that he did a great job of kind of turning that program around. And the rest of that year, I think we struggled. I can't remember exactly what the record was, but we ended up with a 8-6 record from a year that really could have been a lot worse. But he's done a great job of building that program up and recruiting and doing things that, really he's taken a stand for a lot of different things that, some people won't. And I think it's paid off for him. And I'm happy to say that I was a part of it for a year.
Did you see I don't know, circumstances or whatever it takes for him to turn around a program? I mean, at one point, it was a thing on the internet, Clemsoning, that Clemson would have a lead and eventually lose it, or Clemson would get off to a good start to a season and lose it. Did you see the qualities in Dabbu that he would transform them? Maybe not necessarily into the power that they are now, because, I mean, that's Alabama-esque at this point. But did you see that in him as he took over?
Well, I was young, so I don't know that I was necessarily looking for it the way I would be now, but there was a certain thing to him to being a young coach and somewhat relating to his players, and then at the same time having the energy to continue to push us to do things that we didn't think were necessarily, maybe not the right thing, but not that we just didn't think were necessarily possible in the moment. And he did a great job of kind of transforming the minds of the guys in the locker room and getting them to believe that, there's nowhere better than Clemson, and there's nothing better that's going to walk out on that field. So, ultimately he's done an awesome job.
Taking a quick break to say thank you for supporting the Dawg Days podcast. By you listening, rating, subscribing, reviewing, all the things you're doing to support the Dawg Days podcast, we're reaching a listener base that's a couple of thousand each episode. So that's each week that we're reaching a great many number of Georgia and SEC football fans. And that also means that this space is available for sponsorship. If that's something that you're interested in, to get your company's name out there to our fan base at UGAsports.com, email Roddy at UGAsports.com. That's RADI at UGAsports.com, and let him know that you want to sponsor the Dawg Days podcast with Dayne. So you transfer from Clemson. What's the decision that goes into that? Was it playing time? Was it just wanting to get more experience? Was it just going somewhere else?
I think some of that was being a freshman and not being confident in myself. To be honest, there's a lot of transferring going on nowadays. Back then it was a little bit more, of a situation when you did, but it was lack of confidence. It was, a year of kind of getting beat up on the scout team and all that kind of stuff. And, just probably being a little bit more sensitive than I needed to be. And, it's kind of hard to say that, but at the same time, that's probably what happened. And what happened was I decided, while my parents were on vacation, so it's not like I called my dad and was like, hey, I'm about to transfer, and he could talk me out of it. They were actually out of the country, to where they did not find out until they got back in country that I had gone in and talked to Coach Dabbu, and I was gone, basically. So but it was basically a situation to where I didn't feel like I was going to be able to have a good shot. And, would I have? Maybe, if I would have stuck it out and been tough-minded and grinded it out. But at the same time, I didn't. I transferred, and I was able to go to Mars Hill University, where I was able to play for 4 years, started for 4 years there and had an unreal career, was able to get married and live kind of a little bit more of a different lifestyle than a D1 athlete, which appealed to me as well, just outside of football as well.
Well, with the coaching that would come for you, I would imagine that experience gave you some perspective that You know what? And media people like me, we don't always treat players like this, but these are teenagers, and sometimes
Yeah.
that most of them don't have it all together by the time that they're on the stage that you're at a Power Five school in college. Did that perspective help you not only at Morris Hill, I guess, as you were growing in confidence, but further as you went into coaching?
Yeah, it did. I think I was able to relate to the freshmen because I knew what they were going through. I knew it was hard. I knew it's not fun. You're recruited so highly. Basically you perform at such a high level for so long. Probably starting when you're 8, 9 years old. You're the guy, and you've been the guy for that long, and so it's hard for somebody who's been in that situation to walk into a situation to where, hey, like, you're going to sit here, you're going to grind, and then you might not get anything out of it. It's hard. It's hard to think about. So, those guys, I mean, my advice to all the freshmen out there is, fight, fight your tail off. You went there for a reason. You made those relationships for a reason. And of course there's always exterior motives to why somebody transfers or why somebody doesn't, then other than, just being a little bit sensitive and hurt that you're not the guy right away. But, that's always a big part of it. And, it's a hard decision to make either way, but it's always something that's gonna come up in every class, every year, every quarterback that walks into the college arena. There's gonna be some kind of trouble that you're gonna have to fight with, or some kind of adversity you're going to overcome. And when you do overcome that stuff and you do come through it, it really does pays dividends in the end for experience.
When did you know that you wanted to get into coaching?
I actually got done at Mars Hill and had an opportunity to go to some rookie mini camps and all that kind of stuff in the NFL. And after that, I actually got asked by the Steelers to come and be like a quality control, not a quality control, but like more like an intern type deal, and kind of get started onto my path of coaching. And I was like, you know what, no, I'm good. I'm gonna stay away from coaching. I've seen what it does to my dad, and I've seen what it does to his time and his family and all that kind of stuff. I'm good. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna be all right. Well, about 6 months later, I started training quarterbacks on the side back then, kind of like what I'm doing now a little bit, and then ended up moving to Nashville, Tennessee to work at D1 Sports, D1 training, and worked there with their combine guys. And then from there, ended up coming back to Georgia and working for Dad for a year. So it was kind of a slippery slope of maybe like half of a season of being out of football. And I knew I wanted to be back a part of it and be back in that arena.
There's that itch, man. That's what all the former players say, is that there's an itch to be around it, and you have to do something to figure it out.
No doubt.
So you come back to Georgia 2014. Were you nervous
Mm-hmm.
about that? Were you nervous about being part of your dad's staff?
Yes, because I knew my dad was going to work me harder than anybody else. I knew that there was going to be a certain level of expectation that I had to live up to. But at the same time, I've always enjoyed that, a little bit of a challenge. And so being able to come in here and then being able to be under Coach Bobo, who was by far one of the best coordinators I've been around, and just watching him game plan and think, and the way he went through his weekly stuff with the quarterbacks, it was really special. And Hudson Mason, being an awesome quarterback that he was, breaking all the records that year for Georgia. And I mean, it was a great experience coming back, being able to be ingrained in that again, and really learned a lot that year, because that was technically my first year of coaching. So that means you get to do all the breakdowns and the installs, and you're constantly over and over inputting this data and breaking down film. So ultimately you're just teaching yourself through, repetition over and over again. So some of the key basics of football, the core fundamentals of football over and over again. And that's kind of where you learn your the base knowledge, the core knowledge that you have as a coach going forward. So that was an awesome experience to be able to do that.
So explain what that quality control role is. I think a lot of the big time colleges have increased the number of quality control coaches they have on one side of the ball or the other. It's a pretty common avenue now for high school coaches for that to be their leap into college in some way. From my understanding, is it a lot of having the data ready for the different coaches and coordinators above you?
It is a lot of trying to have everything or the next team or next opponents as thoroughly broken down and organized as possible, basically controlling the quality of how these coaches, go about their business. And each coach has a little bit different of a way of they want things broken down or their notebooks to look a certain way, or these, for this group, this is how I want my cut up to look, and this is how I want my cut up to look. So, you're behind the scenes doing a lot of that work, but you're also doing a lot of the initial breakdown for those guys and kind of giving them, they walk into the first night of watching film with little bit of a clue because you've already done the basics of these, these breakdowns from which, defensive lineman puts his hand down a certain way to, the defensive coordinator's last 5 years and his stats and records against teams like us, or the run versus the pass, and just all the little fine details of, things that, don't necessarily translate in every situation, but a lot of times there's that little nugget that they're able to find and they're able to pull out that really makes a difference. So it was fun.
So your year at Georgia was 2014. You wind up with the Buffalo Bills in 2015. You mentioned that earlier. How did that come about?
Yeah, so basically at Georgia there is a nepotism law. So I was turning 25, and at 25 that law kicks in. So I basically, Dad could not keep me on staff anymore, even though I was technically a volunteer that year because of that rule. Basically, I had to move on. And so Dad wrote some letters to all the NFL guys that he knew, and Rex Ryan was one of them. And Rex, being a coach's son himself, took rather a different opinion to that rule, and he did not like it. So he's like, you know what, you got a spot with me, come on. And Rex, and I mean, he is, I'll say that, getting up there and being able to be with those guys. I had been a quarterback guy or quarterback receiver pass game type guy my whole life, not really diving into the run game, because all I did was hand that ball off or make a simple run check and, get moving on. When do we get to throw the ball? That was my mindset. But, getting to go up there and be with Greg Roman, he did an unreal job this past year with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens and those guys. Just being in that system to where I walked in there and they're like, yeah, I think we're going to use you as the tight ends and work with the tight ends and O-line, and you're going to draw all the run game and pass protections. And I was like, oh, okay. I know nothing about that. And it was amazing how little I did know about that going into that year. But when I came out of that year, having developed that knowledge and that skill set, coaching those positions, it was awesome. And having those older coaches kind of take you under the wing and teach you and take their time to, teach a dumb little 25-year-old how to draw the drawing right for the players was a big deal and a great influence on how I've learned to take young coaches, even now, just trying to, whoever's in the coaching industry, it's about helping the next coaches, about developing them and getting them to a place where they can be an asset for you in the future and your team. And so the big thing is, that was one of the biggest things I learned there was, one, the run game, and number two, how to be as a coach and how to help grow the next generation of coaches.
It's funny you say that I've heard a lot of coaches say that the best way to be a well-rounded coach is to coach something that you don't know much about, because then you understand
Right.
it better from a different, whether it be a running backs coach coaching defense a little bit to understand how you scheme for that. The similar thing
Hmm.
goes with running back and quarterback. I would think that you understand those responsibilities or even the blocking schemes ahead of you better than you would have had you just coached quarterbacks.
No doubt. No doubt. And, it was interesting because the next year, if I would have stayed another year with Buffalo, they were actually going to flip me and a defensive guy. And I was going to work for the defense and he was going to work for the offense. And just, that was their whole mindset, was developing us as coaches. And it was a good year, to do that and to learn all those things and then be able to take that stuff with me was awesome.
So 2015, you're in Buffalo. Obviously, that's the year that the change happens at Georgia.
Hmm.
Was that difficult being away from your family around that time?
Uh, yes. And part of that, yes, is because that's when when we moved to Buffalo and really truly moved away for the first time in our lives, me and my wife. That was actually when my daughter started suffering with Crohn's at about 9 months old.
Hmm.
So that plus the whole turmoil that was going on back home, which, it was kind of sudden. So it wasn't like the whole year we're like, oh man, this is crazy. We basically ended up winning 10 games, I think, or 9 games, and just beat Georgia Tech. And then it happened, and it was like, oh wow, oh, okay, that's kind of crazy. But Dad handled it so well that we were able to handle it well. And then it also helped that, within I believe it was like the next 2 weeks, he was already going to Miami or was already getting interviewed and all that kind of stuff. So I think that helped a lot, being able to have that. But ultimately, yeah, it was a little different because that was my wife is from Athens. I'm basically, I claim Athens as home, because that's where I grew up. A lot of my formative years were there. So it was tough to think, what, we might not be back in Athens for a while. But at the same time, it was not so, I guess, jolting that it kind of shook us more than it should have. So, that's a big attribute to, or big compliment to Dad and how he handled it and how he handled it with us.
Yeah, and I think that people have memories of that 2015 season, but publicly it didn't really start to turn until after the Florida game that year, and that's
Right.
more than halfway through the season. Before that, yeah, there was some disappointment. There was the Alabama loss at home in the rain, but
Mhm.
that was Georgia was favored against Alabama in that game, and if Georgia performs better, you never know what could
Right.
happen. Things work out like they should. I mean, your dad got to go back to his alma mater. Maybe it was a good thing that you were in Buffalo to be insulated from that a little bit. Maybe it was a good thing that the Miami job opened so your dad had something to move on to. Things
No
work
doubt.
out, and then you get a chance to be a quarterback coach with him at Miami. Were you surprised that that came about? Was that something you were excited about? Obviously, you had to be excited to leave the cold weather and get to South Beach.
Yeah, well, we literally moved out of a blizzard. We were packing the house up in a blizzard. I should say my wife was packing up. The coaches' wives are the toughest human beings in the world because, like, we get called and we get a job somewhere else and we leave and we're out recruiting and they're having left with the kids and packing up the house and getting everything ready, much less in a blizzard. But had to move out of blizzard and drove down to 85-degree weather, so it took a little bit of the sting off.
So you get to Miami. You had Brad Kaya for a year, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, he's one of the most prolific quarterbacks in the history of that school. And
Hmm.
you had some turbulence at quarterback after that. Just getting
Right.
into the flow of recruiting, getting into the flow of being, you're one of the assistant coaches. You're not quality control anymore. How did you handle that, and what did you learn?
Oh, I learned an unreal amount. But a lot of it came from just managing my time and managing, because as a quality control, you're kind of told, all right, I need this, I need this, I need this, and I need it by this time and this date, and you can kind of go do it. and you kind of just put your head down and grind. Whereas as a coach and a position coach, um, you have to kind of set your own schedule and figure out how to do your job the best way you can. And luckily, we did have Brad Kaya coming in. Brad Kaya was awesome. He did an unreal job, and he had his best year with us, which was great. And we were able to kind of get off on the right foot, winning a bowl game for the first time in 10 years, and getting some momentum going. And then after that, Malik Rozier did an unreal job of coming in and competing. And he might not have been the passing quarterback that everybody wanted, but he controlled our offense and did an unreal job with the pieces around him in that second year, and took us, we ended up losing to Pittsburgh in the final game, but other than that, we're undefeated for the whole year. I mean, the kid did a really nice job in some really big games, going through that year versus Notre Dame and Virginia Tech, and some of Florida State for the first time in forever. He did an unreal job of controlling that offense and spitting through. But then some of the younger kids in the next year found a way to let their skill set shine, and we felt like there were some things that they could provide us that we needed, and so we tried to take some chances. And it didn't work out exactly the way we thought it would or hoped it would, but at the end of the day, those kids competed, and all of them did a good job of fighting and sticking with it. And so we were happy with those guys, and now those young kids have a chance to grow a little bit. So it'll be interesting in the next couple of years with those guys.
Yeah, and Miami, if nothing else, I think you could easily say, and this is me being completely fair, I think not even just because I'm chatting with you, that Miami was left in a better position after you guys left than when you first got there. Just in terms of, like you said, with the Florida State win or the victory over Notre Dame. I mean, that was like the top of the college football world, both with College Game Day and the atmosphere and the excitement. Miami was rocking there for a second, and that's something that I don't feel like they'd experienced for quite a while there.
Yeah, I mean, it really was an unreal experience being at Miami. It's a one-of-a-kind place. And being able to enjoy and endure at the same time the excitement that's always around that program at all times of the year was an experience, and it was a great growing experience for me personally.
So your dad retires and you're not retained on the staff. What is the last few months of your life? Has it just been a whirlwind to kind of resettle?
It has. Initially your first thought is what's the next job going to be? Because you're so ingrained in being a football coach and so ingrained in that type of deal. But I think I very quickly had decided that I wanted to go back to the NFL, because at that point I felt like I had learned the most there. And then I felt like the lifestyle that those coaches are able to live, yes, it is a long grind. It's a long season, but there are certain things that they're able to do that that college coaches don't get the chance because of recruiting and because the way that a pro team was run compared to a college team. And I felt like that lifestyle and that deal would link up well with not only myself but my family, and was looking to get into that back into the NFL world for a long time, for about 3 months, just waiting on phone calls, all this kind of stuff. And you're just running around trying to do everything you can. And then it kind of gets to the point to where you're like, what, is this really what I should be doing? Because, ultimately, it says in Proverbs, all a man's ways are wise according to himself, but, the Lord ends up directing your path. So, you might be thinking you're doing the right thing, for the right reasons, and you're thinking, hey, I'm gonna glorify God with what I'm doing, but at the same time he might be like, hey, it's not exactly what I had in mind, so you're gonna go do this. And so he's put a lot of different things in place to get us to where we're at now, so we're excited about the future.
Yeah, so tell me about Quarterback Catalyst and the coaching and what you're doing with young quarterbacks in the South.
Yeah, so basically, it's an awesome opportunity. This world of quarterback coaching has really blown up over the past couple of years, and it's something that is, I think, still a little young in how it's done. I think I've got a unique opportunity to bring some experience, not only college but NFL experience, to these young kids and allow them to, really grow. And then once, not only I can teach them the technique and all that kind of stuff, but once they've kind of got that down and they're getting older in age and starting to get to a point where we can start developing them as mental quarterbacks too, being able to develop them in their game in that aspect as well is a big plus. And then, just knowing when to push them and when to, do recovery things and just different things like that, to where able to influence these kids both on and off the field is a big part of, why I'm doing it.
I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit and kind of test some of the expertise that I know you have. You mentioned the mental aspect of it. A lot of people, they know the accuracy is required in the throws. They know you have to have a powerful arm and good footwork. But mentally, what quarterbacks have to know and remember, way before you go into a huddle. Can you give me an example of just what a play call sounds like in the huddle and what you have to remember to tell the rest of the guys in a huddle?
Yeah, and it's not just being able to spit out of a play. There's short plays that are like R44 or R144 takeoff. That's easy. And then there's plays that are like, right gun flex, zip, P346 fullback. And you can get into the details and break it down as much as you can. But the big thing a quarterback has to be able to do is not only be able to say those things, but he's got to be able to communicate those things to where the guys can hear it. So it's not just walking in there, hey guys, this is what we got, R144 takeoff on one-on-one, ready break, right? Hey, we got R144 takeoff. All right, let's go, guys. I need a little protection. I'm throwing the ball downfield. O-line, give me a little time. Receiver, make sure you stack them. I'm going to lay this ball outside. Just being able to communicate those things a little bit more than just what you're supposed to do. The great ones are able to turn a play call into a conversation, into a kind of a play or a time that kind of disarms everybody and gets everybody ready to go and ready to go. So it's an interesting deal to be able to teach some of these young kids that type of deal, but a lot of them are at the point to where they can do that. They're smart kids and working with some good ones. So
how have you seen the position change, whether it be since you've started coaching quarterbacks or just growing up around a lot of great ones?
Well, there's a lot of responsibility put on these kids even now in high school. Back in high school when I was there, the best or the most I would check a play was A gap, run game, A gap to A gap. Just simple things. But now, they're going to the line making checks. If they don't like something, they can change the play, some of them, and depending on who they are and how long they've been in the system, they're really running the show, and it's fun. And then also the ability to be mobile nowadays is a big part of it. We see it over and over every year. It's not necessarily the guy who can run for 100 yards, but it's a guy who, if everything breaks down around him, he's still able to escape, make a throw, make a wise decision on the move. And then if he's got to tuck it, he can get, 15, 20, 30 yards. The better and better athlete you are, the more exciting it becomes. But yeah, it's a big part of the game now.
These top level quarterbacks, whether it be someone like Brad Kaya, who you coached, or someone like Jake Fromm at Georgia right now, about how many hours of studying, whether it be from the playbook or film or whatever, how many hours are they doing where it's the sitting and watching and not just the on the practice field?
It is. There's requirement hours, basically the meeting time that, the coach demands. So that's probably close to, I would say, probably around 8 hours a week right there that they have to do. And then the great ones, the ones that are really good, probably, double or triple that within a week. So they're probably getting in, I'd say they're getting in probably close to 30 hours a week. Maybe not that much, maybe more like 24, but I mean, it's those kids, the ones that really love it and the ones that really dive into it. There's, on all our apps and all that kind of stuff, we can track how much those guys are actually watching film. And you can tell the ones who watch the film are the ones who come in prepared, the ones who come in ready to play the game and who don't freak out in a big moment. They're the guys that have the confidence of that hard work that's been put in, that, the grind in the dark has shown in the light. It's, it's a big part of, becoming a quarterback that can handle adversity when adversity strikes in the middle of the big game. So it's a big deal. And those guys, they put a lot of time into it.
You've got a cousin right now, Max Johnson, who's at Oconee County High School. He's going through the process, committed to LSU. I don't know if you have a relationship with Brock Vandergriff at your alma mater at Prince Avenue. He just committed to Oklahoma. How much has the recruiting process changed from, even what you went through or what you've seen your dad do or what you even did the last few years to what they're going through now? And how do you get them prepared based on your experience?
Well, the quarterback position is being, discovered earlier and earlier every year. There's some coaches that won't offer you until after your junior year, and there's some coaches that will offer you as a freshman. And so it's, quarterbacks are kind of expected to commit early and then help recruit their class even more so than ever before. And you're seeing a lot of young kids making a lot of decisions. Like Brock hasn't even played his junior year of football, and he's committed to Oklahoma. Max committed last year right before his junior year, I believe, or in the middle of it or right after it. So it's happening early and earlier with those guys, but at the same time, there's so many more camps and so many more ways to be exposed to college coaches nowadays that if you've got the right skill set and you are more developed than a lot of kids at an early age, they find you. And so it kind of gets the ball rolling a little earlier. And I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse to those kids because they kind of get pushed into the limelight earlier than they're probably ready. But then you get the exception like a Max. And to be honest, Max and Brock are both very mature young men. I've got a good relationship with both of them, and they've handled this process better than most. And Max, his dad is Brad Johnson, has won a Super Bowl, all that kind of stuff. So that helps. He kind of had us in his corner. And then Brock, his dad's the head coach of the high school football team. But you don't always get that backing for all these kids. And so it's tough on a lot of them to be able to filter through all the different things that are going on in the recruiting world.
More is definitely asked of players than ever has been asked before. At the same time, you end up with a guy like Trevor Lawrence at Clemson who can come in and meet those expectations. And some of that is because of what you're talking about with these quarterback camps that prepare quarterbacks earlier and earlier. And so if they have the right mental maturity and emotional maturity to be able to handle what comes with all of the skill set, a situation can happen like happened last year, or even happened the year before with Tua Tagovailoa. I do have some quick hitters. I've already kept you 10 minutes longer than I told you I would, so I'm going to try to get some quick stories. Is there a particular throw that you saw from a Georgia quarterback, whether it be as a kid running around the practice fields or when you were there in 2014? Is there a particular throw that remains in your mind as that was one of the best things I've ever seen?
Well, I think it was not in a game, but it was Matthew Stafford as a true freshman. It was 7-on-7. They were just doing some stuff during the summer, and he comes out there, and it's a deep post. So the kid, I forget who was running the route, but, Matthew drops back and puts it on an absolute line. Ball doesn't get it over 6 feet off the ground and travels about 45 yards and absolutely pegs the receiver right in the heart. 45 yards down the field. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's different. And then one other time was also at practice is, I'm finishing my senior year of high school, and I'm thinking I'm got a pretty good arm. And this is when Matthew Stafford was still there. And where I'm out at bowl practice, I had just had 3 weeks off, and I come back out there to throw a little bit. So I'm letting it go a little bit. airing it out, and I'm probably throwing it 67, close to 70 yards, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Well, Matt comes over there. He's like, "Hey, let me throw one." And he drops back and throws it like 85 yards. And this is a kid who had just went through the whole season, is in the middle of bowl practice. His arm is nowhere near the strength that it should be, and just absolutely launches a ball. And it was like, dude, that's not even fair. So those two throws have always stuck out in my mind as, just the difference between good talent and elite talent. That was kind of a defining moment in my life.
He had the kind of arm that, like, if he really gets into it, receivers have a difficulty catching it. It's that fast.
Yeah.
What about a catch? Is there a catch in practice that you remember? Because, I mean, you were around for a lot of great ones, including, I never saw one better than A.J. Green at Georgia.
Yeah, AJ kind of like takes the cake with that stuff. He kind of did some stuff that you wouldn't expect to be possible in the air, how he was able to adjust his body, plus how long and strong he was with the ball up in the air. I mean, it was impressive to watch him to do that type of stuff. I mean, he kind of just did it every day. It wasn't like a one player or the other. It was, oh, there goes AJ again, doing his thing. So it was fun to watch him just be the tremendous athlete that he was and is.
A hot shot recruit's coming over. You've already been prepped. You do this all the time. What was your mom's go-to meal for recruits?
Catering. We had people cater, and they did an awesome job for us at Trump's Catering, and but it was always fun because I knew I was getting a good meal, and then I knew I was going to get to compete with some of the recruits, and whether it was ping pong or pool or something like that, I was going to get somebody to play something. I was always that little kid that was nagging at somebody to do something. So it was fun. Got to build a lot of relationships with them, and as they went through.
Well, give me one of the funny recruiting stories of one of the guys at your house.
Let's see. Golly, there's a few of them, but I think the funniest was, we always had a pool growing up in our backyard, and I'm not gonna, call anybody out or anything, but there's always those guys that you're like, can you swim? As like a little 10th grader asking a senior or whoever it is going into college, can you swim? They're like, yeah, I can swim. Yeah, because I'm like, all right, let's go. We play this game called the straw game, right? Where you take a little McDonald's straw and you cut it down to about, 2 inches, and you'd hide it down at the bottom of the straw, and it floats up slowly. And whoever gets the straw wins as it comes up. And it's, a lot of people are playing it. Of course, there's always those guys that acted like they could swim, and then all of a sudden you just see them hanging around on the shallow end the whole time, and you're like, come on, dude. And they just, the little 10th grader out there ragging all these 5-star recruits about them being able to swim. But that was always fun for me, and just the recruiting experience was a great experience for me, just to learn how to talk to people and communicate, which was big.
Your dad's a TV analyst now. How's he gonna do?
Oh, he'll kill it. He's been doing that for 30 years now. So he'll have no problem with that. And I hear there's a lot of different resources for those guys to figure out what's coming up next. So it's interesting to hear all the details that go into that. But he's gonna do an awesome job, and he'll represent the ACC well.
If people want to find out about Quarterback Catalyst and what you're doing, or if it's a recruiter or parent that want to get in touch with you for some coaching, how can they contact you?
Yeah, it's the easiest way is to look it up on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page up there. I'm not sophisticated enough to have my own website yet, but I'm working on that. But that, and then Instagram. I'm on Instagram at QB Catalyst. Just kind of spelled out the way it should be. And, if you look at Catalyst Quarterback Development on Facebook, the page should pop up, and you can kind of check us out, check out some of the videos. Had some good interviews on there with some guys that I know. And, it's a good little resource, whether you choose to come out there or not. But, yeah, I mean, there's that. And then hopefully down the road, we're looking into opening two D1 sports training facilities, one in Athens, one in Lawrenceville, and those should be coming around the bend here in January, February. So we're looking forward to getting rolling with that stuff too.
Well, Jon, I can't thank you enough for your time. And what are you going to be doing on Saturdays in the fall? I feel like you probably haven't had a Saturday off in the fall for a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I guess technically I had some off when I was in the NFL, but I don't know if you'd call them off when you're traveling to away games or the home hotel or all that kind of stuff. But it'll be fun. This is the first year that I don't either blood or by work have a certain team that I just have to cheer for. So of course I'll be cheering for my guys down there in Miami. Those kids and a lot of those coaches are still hold dear to my heart. But and then I'll be cheering for the Dogs. Just being able to be back in Athens, so it'll be a fun year. I'm excited just to watch and get to observe and be one of the other guys for a while. Be on the other side, so it'll be fun.
Quarterback Catalyst is the name of Jon Richt's quarterback academy, where he's training from his knowledge. Jon, can't not thank you enough for your time. Hope we get to do this again soon.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on here.
Big thanks to Jon Richt for joining us here on the Dawg Days podcast. I really thought that his story of growing up around the program, seeing many different eras of Georgia players, would resonate with all of you. We wish him the best on his new business of coaching some quarterbacks here in the Southeast, especially in North Georgia. Coming up next week on the Dawg Days podcast, one of the all-time great recruiting hosts for Georgia. You'll see who that is. Thanks so much for supporting us and everything we're doing with this podcast. Continue to rate, subscribe, review, all those positive things. And we'll see you next time here on the Dawg Days podcast.